Part 12, the true, final, climactic battle for Empire of Shadowstein then suddenly begins invading the Empire of Celestia, seeking to finally claim the solar system for themselves so that they can move on to their far, far greater plans, and thus, the final war begins. Darkest Emperor Alpha himself leads the charge from the largest of the platforms they've constructed around the sun, its surface gleaming like polished obsidian beneath the star's relentless glare. His army, numbering in the billions, stretches out behind him, an unbroken line of monstrous war machines and battle-hardened soldiers, all arrayed in their darkest armor, their weapons gleaming malevolently. The sky is black with their numbers, and the very air quakes with the sound of their march. The fleet, under Admiral Voss' command, speeds across the vastness of space, the X-Ray engineers constantly monitoring the probe and the connection to the black hole. They receive orders to intercept the invading forces, which are composed of both Shadowstein battleships and X-Ray scout vessels. The battle is fierce, with both sides employing their newfound power to devastating effect. The black hole's energy flows through the fleet like blood, giving the ships unprecedented speed and firepower.
Darkest Emperor Alphas.
A massive battleship adorned with razor-sharp obsidian spikes cuts a path through the enemy fleet, its engines screaming as it approaches the capital ship at the heart of the Shadowstein fleet. The admiral of the Shadowstein forces, a demon named Zargoth, engages in a brutal dogfight with Admiral Voss, their ships weaving in and out of the debris field left by the battle. The probe, meanwhile, continues to transmit data back to the fleet, providing invaluable intelligence on the enemy's movements and strategies. The X-Ray engineers work tirelessly to maintain the connection to the black hole, their fingers dancing over the controls of the ship's bridge. The crew members look on in awe as the X-Ray, despite their alien appearance and seemingly inscrutable ways, prove to be formidable warriors and invaluable allies. But both sides are shocked when Darkest Emperor Alpha climbs out of his ship and himself begins flying towards the black hole for some reason. Darkest Emperor Alpha then FLIs into the black hole, destroys the probe, then unleashes the power of his tendrils of darkness and absorbs the entire black hole into himself. The Shadowstein fleet is caught off guard by this unexpected development, while the X-Ray ships, unprepared for such a move, are helpless to stop it. Admiral Voss, realizing the grave danger this poses to the entire fleet, orders an immediate retreat. The crew members scramble to obey, while the X-Ray engineers struggle to maintain control of their ships.
But then, even when they enter into hyperspace, they aren't fast enough to avoid Darkest Emperor Alpha's tendrils of darkness, which then begin to cause each of the ships to rip apart into pure energy within hyperspace. POV switches to that of Admiral Voss in his last moments. Well, guess this is how it ends. Admiral Voss thinks to himself as he sees his ship slowly being ripped apart into pure energy within hyperspace starting from the front. And he is seeing this all within slow motion as he then closes his eyes, before he is also torn apart into pure energy within hyperspace. The last thing he sees before he closes his eyes is the sight of the X3 engineers struggling to maintain control of their ships as they are, also caught up in Darkest Emperor Alpha's tendrils of darkness. The engines of the X3 ships start to groan and whine as they too are being torn apart piece by piece until they vanish into pure energy within hyperspace. And then, the only fleet ships that remain are those of the Empire of Shadowstein. POV switches to that of Emperor Solaris on his own separate ship. What do you mean? The ships were caught even in hyperspace. In hyperspace, they travel to zillions of times the speed of light. It can't be possible that something could have caught them. Emperor Solaris explains after hearing that the entire celestial fleet was destroyed after being caught while in hyperspace. Emperor Solaris then attempts to get away on his ship alongside Zarya, Lord Argus, Reaper, and Seraphim, both his blade and the elementalist mage, but then he is suddenly forced to crash down onto the planet Earth, and he and his most trusted are then met by their equivalents within the Empire of Shadowstein: Darkest Emperor Alpha, Dark Matter Dr. Erebus, Dark Lord Lothar, Dark King Mordecai, and Dark Queen Lilith. Now, just where do you think that you five are going? Darkest Emperor Alpha says to the group from the Empire of Celestia. Emperor Solaris glares at Darkest Emperor Alpha and says, "We're leaving this place, you abomination. You have no claim on us or our people. Well, we will on your people, once you are out of the way by our hands." Darkest Emperor Alpha says. Emperor Solaris then realizes that they are going to have to fight now, and that none of them are going to be making it out alive. Very well, then. Solaris says with a sigh, "Let it be known that we did not go quietly, and when our people rise up against you, as they most certainly will, you will pay dearly for what you've done here today. Hey, bring it on," Darkest Emperor Alpha says to them, as they all then separate into their respective fights. Darkest Emperor Alpha vs. Emperor Solaris Dark Matter Dr. Erebus vs. Zarya Dark Lord Lothar vs. Lord Argus Dark King Mordecai vs. Reaper and Dark Queen Lilith vs. Seraphim. The first fight to focus on is Darkest Emperor Alpha vs. Emperor Solaris, where it is quite clear that Darkest Emperor Alpha is merely toying with Emperor Solaris, seemingly getting enjoyment out of seeing a warrior of the light looking so pitiful. Meanwhile, the battle between Dr. Erebus and Zarya is much closer until Dr. Erebus transforms into Supreme Erebus, and then, with a single blow, Zarya is defeated, but Erebus can see usefulness in her, and thus decides to spare her, but teleports her into a cell on Saturn. Dark Lord Lothar is effortlessly dealing with Lord Argus, as one would expect from a battle between a skilled and experienced warrior and a humble advisor. And soon, there are only advisor bits littering the area. As for Dark King Mordecai vs. Reaper, well, he literally had already defeated a better and stronger form of Reaper in the form of Phantom, and thus Reaper is little trouble to defeat. As for Dark Queen Lilith vs. Seraphim, well, this fight is actually quite interesting, being a clash of spells of darkness and light, but in the end, Dark Queen Lilith wins with very little difficulty overall, leaving Emperor Solaris as the last one standing of his team. Already very weakened, but then Darkest Emperor Alpha gets bored and, as to make his death quick yet painful, he uses his tendrils of darkness to tear off each of his limbs, one by one, but quickly, thus bringing the end of the empire of Celestia.